Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Rosanne Parry. She is the author of the best-selling novels A Wolf Called Wander, A Whale of the Wild, and A Horse Named Sky, as well as The Wolf Effect, a picture book illustrated by Jennifer Therms. These Voices of the Wilderness stories center on the voices of wild animals and focus on their struggle to survive in a dangerous and changing world. Based on rigorous research and inspired by the real animals of the Western United States, Rosanne's books are treasured by teachers and librarians and adored by animal-loving readers of all ages. She lives with her family in Portland, Oregon, and writes in a treehouse in her backyard. Her latest book, A Wolf Called Fire, was released in February. Welcome to the show, Rosanne.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, well, I feel like we are so much more than these bios. So let's start. If you could tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I feel like I'm a lifelong explorer of new things. I have always loved to learn new things. I like to read, I like to travel. I have been a teacher. In addition to writing, I'm also a bookseller. I work at Annie Bloom's Books in Portland.
Okay.
And in addition to being the writer, and then I also, I write the books and do lots of traveling for school visits and that sort of thing. So yeah, between the researching the books and the getting around and visiting kids at schools all over the country, I have a busy life. It's great.
Yes, and it sounds it's all very literary focused, which is wonderful.
Yeah. I have a book family. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you always loved reading and writing?
I've always loved to read, but I'll be honest, when I was young, I hated writing. I just
Oh,
did. I am super bad at spelling.
okay.
It's just hard for me. And I was really discouraged about it too, because even when I knew I did a good job on my paper, it had come back and all these things were circled that I had done wrong. The comma, like who knows where the comma goes? People don't even agree where the comma goes. Anyway, it made me feel like I was a bad writer. And so I was, I think, a very discouraged writer as a young person. And it wasn't until I started studying another language when I was 12, I could start taking foreign language classes, and I could spell just fine in German. Thank you very much. And Spanish also easier to spell than English. English is just a hard language, and I struggle with it still. And so the writing piece was hard for me, and I'm super grateful to have awesome copy editors at the publishing house who helped me get all that stuff just right in the very end. But but yeah, so I'd say I have always been a reader, but I came to writing much later in my life.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you have, after all of these books that you've had come out, do you have any advice you'd give to maybe newer writers that are just starting out in the
Mhm.
field?
I think it's really important to try a lot of things. Um, I know I it takes a long time to write a book, right? Most
Yeah.
people take about a year to write a book. And children especially, they're teachers are lucky if they have a week to give them to finish a writing assignment, right? It was when I was a teacher, it was one of the things I liked the least about it, is that I always knew, oh, if I could have given them more time, I would have gotten a better result from them, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so realizing that, adult writers who are not in school have more time to do the thing and to give yourself permission to, you start something with enthusiasm and then it peters out and you're like, oh, this isn't really as good as I thought it was going to be. It's fine to set that aside
Yeah.
and write something else, and maybe you'll come back to it or maybe you won't. But professional writers do that all the time. So that's, I think, helpful is to just try a lot of things
Yeah.
and worry less about finishing it. If you hope to get paid for writing, eventually you have to finish things. But
Yeah.
along the way, as you're learning to write, you don't have to finish anything, and starting is more valuable than finishing at the beginning, I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic advice. I don't think I've had that on the show yet. And I think it's so true. I think even someone that's maybe not a writer, right? We've all experienced where we hit a wall, where we just can't go anymore with our creative or our
Mhm.
mental process surrounding it. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay. And I think we learn over time to just, okay, leave that, move on to
Mhm.
something else. And then you see it kind of sparkle again. But I think again, you can apply that to so many facets of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it gives your subconscious mind a little time to work on the thing, and yeah, and new opportunities and ideas come to you in unexpected ways. So yeah, I have um time is as important ingredient in your writing as anything else. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, listeners, I'm getting to see the beautiful view behind Roseanne here, and I am wondering if this inspires your writing because this is where you write from, correct?
Yeah, right now because it's
Okay,
January, am in this little studio that's in the back corner of my backyard. So it's quite small. It's just, it's like 8 8 by 8, I think.
sure.
My husband just built me the little studio back here. But then in the summertime, I do ride in a tree house out in the back in a big Douglas fir tree, and I love that. I like being outside to work in the summertime, and it's good to have a place that's a little bit separate from my family and all the house things, and that I can just sink into the writing and just do this thing.
Yeah, so your to-do list isn't like summoning you in your subconscious mind.
Exactly. Exactly. There's nothing to eat out here. There's nothing to clean. Just writing. So yeah, all the bills to pay are in the house.
Yeah.
So
Well, for listeners that maybe haven't got to pick up your series yet, can you tell them about A Wolf Called Fire?
well, I really love the opportunity to come back and write about wolves again. So A Wolf Called Fire is a companion book to A Wolf Called Wander, and it is about Wander's brother, Warm, right? He's the omega of his pack. He's the smallest one and the least dominant one. And so it follows that same childhood that they have together. The An outsider pack comes and attacks their pack and kills their alpha. And in Wander's story, he runs away and keeps going.
Mhm.
But I wanted to think about, but what happened to the rest of them? And so many children have written me and said, "What about Warm? We
Yeah.
love him. He loved his brother. What happened to him?" And so I love that. And then I also love new things that we've learned about pack dynamics and how the structure of a pack works. It's very fluid because wolves have short lives. The leadership of a pack turns over pretty often.
Yeah.
And there's more than one successful leadership style. And I learned about a wolf in Yellowstone, Wolf 8, um, who was also an Omega wolf in his natal pack with his brothers. But I think because of that experience, he had lots of empathy for pups, and he was really, really good at mentoring them. And so he met up with an alpha female who had 8 very young pups whose alpha male had been killed. And so instead of trying to forge a bond with the mother, he just started teaching the little ones how to hunt. They start with little things, mice and squirrels and stuff. And this alpha female could see, even though he was like small and not super impressive, he was really good at mentoring them. And so she took him on as an alpha when he was very young. But he was such a good mentor that all eight of those pups were like fanatically loyal to him. And they went on to become the most powerful pack in Yellowstone, right? And he had, when another pack came into conflict with his, typically when two packs come into conflict, they fight until somebody's alpha is killed.
Okay.
And then that's it, and the defeated pack scatters. But he made a different choice. He would fight that other pack until their alpha submitted to him, but he never killed an alpha that submitted to him.
Wow.
He let them live. And which seems like a weakness, maybe, but here's the thing, that alpha, having survived, goes back with his pack, leaves the territory and goes to the rest of his pack. That was awful. We are never going over there again. We
Yeah.
are absolutely never, never, ever crossing into that territory, right? So that strengthens the territory
Yeah.
of the pack in a way that killing, because if they just killed the alpha, the pack would scatter and go, huh, what happened? That was terrible. I don't know. I feel bad. But they don't really understand what happened in the way that they do when the alpha says, we are never, ever
Yeah.
crossing that pack's territory. And so it made them extraordinarily powerful. And so this most unlikely wolf became like this patriarch of a whole line of wolves after him who took his less aggressive and less violent, domineering sort of leadership style and carried it forward. And it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I loved the author's note at the end of these books where then you get
mhm,
to learn like, well, this is truly based off research they're doing on wolves
mhm.
and packs of wolves. And so I learned so much and my son and I both just devoured the book. We loved it. And then to get to the author's note and realize, well, this is real life too, and how true it was is just such a special piece, I think, to this book.
I'm so grateful that HarperCollins and Green Willow, they give me the space to do that extra matter in the back. I have been a teacher, so I do have some sense of what a teacher needs the book to do in a
Yeah.
classroom. And so having that nonfiction element is helpful to them, makes it easier for them to choose it as a read aloud. And and um I want readers to feel connected to the wilderness, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, childhood is a much more urban thing than it used to be, right? I mean, the number of children who grow up on farms, much smaller
Yeah.
than it once was. And but I want kids to feel that connection to the wilderness. So even if they're not near it now, they'll seek it out as adults. And they'll want to protect the
Yeah.
wilderness and the ecosystem. And so that story that helps them build an emotional connection. And then, and here's also some information about what to do with that feeling of connection,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
listeners, I would highly recommend getting this as a print copybook as well, because the illustrations are just gorgeous. And I think that helps bring your element of them feeling connected too, right? For the children that maybe
Mhm.
aren't familiar with being out in the woods or, more
Yeah.
urban lifestyle. They're gorgeous and they really add to the story.
Yeah. Uh, Monica Arminio is the illustrator of A Wolf Called Fire and also A Wolf Called Wander, and she's amazing. I'm
Okay.
always in awe of somebody who can write because I can barely draw a bath. But
I have
but
stick figures. That's
she's
about my
amazing.
level too.
Exactly. Um, but she's so beautiful. Monica Arminio lives in Madrid, Spain,
Okay.
and she's just phenomenal artist. And she also works in animation. And the one thing I try and do as I'm writing, I keep a list of the common name and the scientific name of all the major animals and plants in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Um, just to make sure that she's looking at the same thing. Like a European badger is very different than an
Yeah.
American badger. European badgers are adorable. They're like Yeah, they're super cute. But have you ever seen a badger ever? They
No.
are trouble. They will not back down from a bear,
Wow.
right? I mean, they're not big, but they are fierce and smelly and yeah, they're
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, you
So,
want to make sure the right
uh,
badger is ending up in there.
exactly, because the European badger is just not at all,
Yeah.
not at all very good. So, so yeah, but she does a fabulous job. She's great to work with. So I'm super grateful that she agreed to do a second one.
Yes. And for listeners that are maybe wondering what the age ranges are for children that you would recommend this to, can you tell them about that?
Well, they're middle grade books.
Sure.
I think of middle grade books as all of the adventure and none of the kissing. Um, but they're really sort of designed for 8 to 14-year-olds. I would say the sweet spot for mine are 10 to 12.
Okay.
Um, sometimes younger kids read them. It is what teachers like to call a circle of life book. But I have a lot of faith in parents' ability to choose well for their children. But
Yeah.
if you've got a kiddo who is super tender-hearted and the notion of, I mean, wolves are predators, right? They
Yeah.
hunt and kill other animals. And if that is too upsetting for your child of whatever age, then this is probably not the book for them,
Yeah.
right?
Or not yet.
Um,
Not right now.
or not yet, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, if they're in that very tender-hearted moment, I have a lot of faith in parents choosing wisely. But it's really designed for those middle grade years. But I gotta say, lots of adults really like them too.
Oh, I
So
loved them. My son and
yeah,
I had so much fun reading them together. So
yeah.
they're great. And he's 9, so listeners, but I
Mhm.
kind of thought too, like, okay, again, life cycle, right? But he didn't really seem too bothered by that, and again, we were reading it
Mhm.
together, so I wasn't too concerned because I figured if he had questions, he could ask me, I'm right there accessible. So, and he
Yeah,
was 8 when we read A Wolf Called Wander, and then now he's 9, and we're digging
yeah.
into A Wolf Called Fire. So, um, well, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
Oh gosh, I think of I think a couple of things. I think I have learned that I can write a lot faster when I don't have to do the cooking and housework. My husband retired in the last year and has stepped into that homemaker role with real enthusiasm.
Love
And I
it.
I am shocked by what a difference. It's not that cooking took so much time. It was the thinking about the food and the planning and the
Yeah,
buying and like all of those pieces of it.
yeah,
And so his willingness to really step in and do not just the physical load, but also the mental load of the planning piece has been huge. So that is one thing I've learned is in the last year is that not having, my children are grown and so not having that work of homemaking
yeah,
all on my own has been huge, right? But
yeah,
I also every time I write about an animal, I really do think about how much I am just another creature among creatures of the earth, you know,
yeah,
and there are, although each one is unique and has special abilities and needs, I think we have much more in common with the creatures of this earth
yeah.
than we have in difference. And so I really do love sort of thinking about that too.
Yeah, I love that I meant to say that about A Wolf Called Fire as well, because I have already read it, obviously, to talk to you, but now my son and I are going to read it. But I felt like there was this coming of age story, this coming of age
Mhm.
theme in there as well. And I just thought,
Mhm.
this is so applicable to children, but in terms of a wolf pack and this wolf called Warm, and
Mhm.
um, I loved that. I thought it was such a good message for our kids to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, truly, also, I feel like I'm still coming into myself and as a leader in my own life, right?
Yeah,
I had one kind of leadership to exert when I was a mother of tiny children. The leadership that my family needed from me when they were all teenagers, very different thing,
sure.
right? Less picking up and more listening. It's lots of driving in places, right? But
Yeah.
and now that my children are grown, need a very different kind of leadership, right? And so I think, the human pack that I'm in changes all the time. And so yeah, I do love that. And thinking about how dynamic a pack leadership can be, and this pack that Warm ends up leading in the end is very different than in character than the one that he grew up in.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hopeful too, that there isn't just only one way to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the message I loved for our kids too. It's like we all bring our differences to the table and we're all made differently for a reason, right? We all contribute to our pack
Hmm.
in our own unique
Hmm.
way. And I think that's an important message for them to know.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. What genres do you enjoy reading?
Because I work at the bookstore and because I am the children's specialist there, I read a lot of kids' books.
Yeah.
I read a lot of picture books, chapter books. I read a lot of graphic novels, and I'm especially fond of middle grade novels.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a big part of my reading life is just sort of my life in the bookstore. And one of the things that I have loved so much about that is seeing sort of eavesdropping on what kids are recommending to each other,
Yeah.
right?
It's a
Just
great
this
source.
week, I know, I love it. And just this week, there was a teacher work day. And so always we have parades of kids who come in. Some come in with their parents. And then we have that like 11 to 13-year-old contingent who've been on a hot chocolate date, and then they all troop into the store together, and I love it. They sit on the floor in the back and read picture books out loud to each other. It's so sweet.
Yeah.
It's really lovely. And to see what they pick or what they recommend to each other, or those 14-year-olds who are in the shop on a first date, and what do they
How
pick to
sweet.
read to
Yeah.
each other? It's really lovely. That I've seen kids like curled up in the poetry corner reading Kerouac out loud to each other in hushed whispers. Going,
Wow.
amazing. It's blowing my mind. because
Yes.
because it's the very first time they've encountered the beat poets, right? And
Yeah.
um so I have loved that, seeing what kids are interested in reading to each other. And then I would say, as far as adult books, I try and read a couple of adult fiction every year, but I read a lot more nonfiction
Sure.
because I'm researching for myself. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense. Well, how in your busyness between writing and the bookstore, how do you find time to read?
Well, I do audiobooks,
Okay.
which is very helpful, right?
Yeah.
Especially if I'm driving around to school visits or something, I'll
Sure.
have an audiobook on and try and read a little in the evening to unwind. But yeah, it is a struggle to always find something. Yeah.
Yeah. How much do you feel like your reading choice is truly your choice? Does that make sense as a question? Or is that like
Yeah,
required
yeah.
reading, quote unquote?
I know. I do struggle with that a little bit because as a bookseller too, here's what I think the value of independent bookstores in the ecosystem is. The chains and the online retailers, they are great at selling you something that is exactly like the last thing you bought,
Yeah.
but they are terrible at showing you something new and
Yeah.
different, right? Independent bookstores, though, are great at championing the debut author
Yeah.
or an author who's been around for a while but is trying something new or different, a different format, a different style, something, creative and interesting. And those bigger outlets are terrible at helping people find it. But independent
Yeah.
bookstores and libraries too, but mostly independent bookstores are really the ones who are like, have you seen this? It's amazing.
Yeah.
When A Wolf Called Wander hit the bestseller list, it had 2 reviews on Amazon. It was not
Wow.
in a single big box store anywhere.
Okay.
That was
Wow.
all independent bookstores who went, look, it has pictures. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And it's from the point of view of an animal. There aren't that many,
Yeah.
in 2019 when it first came out. And and that was huge. I'm hugely grateful for that. And because that is true, I do feel a particular obligation to pay attention to debut
Sure.
books and and read them and give them the best boost I can. And also not just read for the sake of do I love this myself, but do I know who this book is for,
Yeah.
right?
The book
Even
matchmaking.
exactly, right. Like this one isn't really my jam, but I do know exactly the sort of kid who would love it,
Yeah.
Or if I introduce this to one kid in this friend group that I know that hovers around the neighborhood, I know for sure they'll all read it because it's totally something that they would love. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do feel that sense of obligation, but it's a pretty joyful obligation, I would say.
Oh, yeah. I mean, either way, we're still making our job reading, right? I mean, either way, it's a win.
Right.
So, but
Right.
I know sometimes I feel that of like, well, I know I have these upcoming interviews and they're all fantastic books. So it's not like I would, but then I'm like, well, when, and then it's like, well, okay, I need to fit in a book that I wanted too, right? I'm very much a mood reader. So I think that sometimes that strikes me
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah.
So, but well, you have
Yeah.
also been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. Can you tell us how you
Yeah.
chose these books?
Sure. Well, I was thinking about things that I've read recently and things that seemed sort of also interested in the particular moment that we are
Yeah.
in in our lives. And so yeah, so I started with The Emotional Lives of Animals, which is a book that I read an earlier edition of this many years ago,
Okay.
and there's a new edition of it out. And what I really liked about it is it really delves into the scientific research behind how do we know what we know about not just the physical life of animals, but their interior, their emotional life, their social life. How can
Yeah.
we determine that? And we're learning more all the time.
Yeah.
And it is really, it's great and interesting to see and good to have um, in the back of my mind as I'm writing a scene and going, is this a fair feeling to put in that situation? Well, let me think about that, right? And think about not just what will serve the particular scene and story, but is that really grounded in our scientific understanding of these animals?
Yeah, I
So
think
that's
this sounds amazing because I think anybody that has spent time, who has a pet that lives in your home, you can
Mhm.
see they have a personality, right? And you can see the ups
Exactly.
and downs or their responses to you or, and when they
Mhm.
maybe when they're not feeling great. I mean, anybody
Mhm.
that lives closely with an animal would be like, they
Yeah.
absolutely have an emotional life.
Yeah. One of the things that I loved when I was researching Mustangs for a horse named Sky, um, is that horses have facial expressions that are quite similar to human expressions. And so it's pretty easy to guess. If you look carefully at a horse's face, you can guess what they're thinking and feeling. And in a way that is not so uh, like for an orca or even a wolf, it's a little more guessing. But horses are just so expressive, and they have things that are very similar to what humans do, and so that was just really fun to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
So
think another really important point of this, right, we lead such busy lives, is taking the time
mhm.
to slow down to be able to notice what is happening around you. I
Mhm.
think that's another really good lesson to learn for adults
Right.
and children, right, of just taking the time to slow down to see it and observe.
Mhm. Yeah, and stop and think like here I am often when I'm in the wild and I'm seeing animals around me. As I understand them more, I'm taking more of a moment to go, okay, what does this creature need from me in this moment?
Yeah.
Am I am I in their line of travel? Am I standing between them and water? Am
Hmm.
I, have they changed their behavior in a way that makes me guess that they're threatened by me? Like what should I respond to based on what I'm seeing in this animal? And it does, it helps me be safer in the wilderness for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that was The Emotional Lives of Animals by Mark, and is it Beckoff?
Back off, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. What's the next book you brought today?
The next book is called When Women Were Dragons. It's by Kelly Barnhall, who has won a Newbery for a middle grade book.
Okay.
But she also wrote this book for adults, and I just love it because it's one of the more fun takes on feminism, I would say.
Okay.
And her, the sort of supposition of the book, if you remember at the end of the Second World War, all these women moved into traditionally male
Yeah.
professions while the men were deployed to the war.
Yeah.
And then when they came back, the expectation was that they would just give up
Yeah.
their employment to these returning men. And and so the supposition of the book was that in response to this sort of move of the patriarchy, spontaneously about a quarter of the women in this country just turned into dragons and flew away. And then, because it was the 1940s, people were like, well, we're definitely not going to talk about that. That would be terrible.
Yeah.
Well, what were the repercussions of that? Because as time went on, women did occasionally spontaneously dragon, and it was funny and lighthearted in a way, but also there was plenty to think about and talk about there
Yeah.
too. So that was really fun. It was a really great vacation read, and I enjoyed it immensely. It's really well
Wow, it
written.
just sounds so unique. I'm definitely,
I
will be
know.
interested to pick that up. So thank you for sharing that
Yeah,
one. So that was When Women
sure.
Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill.
Mhm.
And then what's the last book you brought today?
The last book is called Sophia's War by Hiba Nur Khan.
Okay.
And I, boy, there's a ton of historical fiction about the Second World War for middle grade readers. And I enjoy those books. I think there's lots of great
Sure.
stories to be told. This is a story I have never heard before, though. This is about the Muslim community of Paris during the Second World War
Oh,
and the things they did to hide Jews during during the Nazi
wow.
occupation of Paris. The Grand Mosque of Paris is connected to the underground catacombs, and so they had a way to actually shelter these Jewish families within their mosque and
Wow.
take them through the tunnels to the river where they could be put on barges and sent north to freedom. And I just look at where we are with Israel and the Palestinians, and it seems it can feel hopeless,
Yeah.
right? How will they ever forgive each other,
Yeah.
right? I mean, a lot of really heavy things have happened,
Yeah. An incredibly
but
complicated history, too.
and
Yeah.
yeah, complex and painful.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a value in knowing that it was not always this way,
Yeah.
that the current situation is not the eternal situation. And in difficult times, people made different choices. And I find that very hopeful.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of hope that that book will find some readership and get people thinking and talking about their history. So yeah,
Absolutely. So is it a middle grade novel then?
it is a middle grade novel.
Okay.
Safi,
Okay,
by
wonderful.
Hubert
By
Khan.
Hiba Noir Khan. So thank you. That
Khan.
sounds absolutely fascinating. And I agree, even in adult fiction, there's a saturation with World War II novels sometimes. So I love getting the
Mhm.
unique story that we have not heard before. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing this
Mhm.
one. Well, how I love to end our show here
Mhm.
is with our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of
Okay.
questions you can answer really quick. Are you a rereader?
Yes, I do. I like to. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I do love to reread. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. And then what is one book you've read that has changed your life?
I have been a fan of Ursula Le Guin's
Oh,
writing
yes.
since childhood, and she's a fellow Portlander who I was lucky enough to meet on a number of occasions later in her life.
Amazing.
So I love all of her books, but the one that really made a difference for me was her book about writing called Steering the Craft.
Okay.
It was one of the first books that I read about writing, and it is probably the most useful one in that there are exercises, there are very helpful essays, and then there are exercises and suggestions for practice
Oh,
that I
wow.
have gone
Okay.
back to again and again and again that are as useful for me now as they were 25 years ago. So, so yeah,
Wonderful.
that's rare, I think, in a writing book.
Yeah.
So
And it stood the test of time over 25 years too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've talked about her many a times on the show, and was not familiar with her until I started hosting this podcast. So hence the
Mhm.
beauty of learning to read widely, right? Like getting all of these recommendations.
Yes,
So we've talked about her many times on the show. Where
good.
is your favorite place to read?
Oh gosh, anywhere outside is really great.
Okay.
I have a tree house I work in the summertime, but we have a porch swing. I just love to be outside when reading.
Wonderful. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
Well, I am lucky enough to be having a book event with a fellow Portlander, Waka Brown, who's an
Okay.
Oregon Book Award winner. And she has a book coming out very close to mine, and her book is called Rick Kotani's $400 Million Summer.
Ooh,
And so that's the one I'm reading right
that
now.
sounds, the title just really draws you in there.
Yeah.
Like, what is this all about? Thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh, it's been fun. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Rosanne Parry. To find all the books that we talked about in this episode today, head on over to bookishflights.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.